There are places you learn not to go. No one explains it fully. They don't need to. The warning is always the same, quiet, certain, and never repeated twice. Stay away from the well. Keep clear of the ditch. Don't go near the water after dark. And if you ask why, the answer is usually avoided, or given in a name. Bloody Bones is not shouted. It's not told like a story. It's spoken low, as though saying it too clearly might draw attention. A name passed down without detail, carried across generations, without ever being fully explained, because it was never meant to be understood, only remembered. Across England, in scattered villages and forgotten fields, that name appears again and again, always tied to places where the ground gives way, where water settles, where darkness gathers and refuses to lift. Wells, ditches, ponds, places that seem ordinary, until you stand too close. What you are about to hear is not one story. It is many. Fragments, accounts, warnings, passed down over time, each one incomplete on its own, but together they form something else, something older, something that has been seen just often enough to never be entirely dismissed. Because there are some things that do not need to be proven, only avoided. There are some names that are not written down at first. They are spoken quietly, almost reluctantly, passed from one voice to another, not as stories meant to entertain, but as warnings meant to be remembered. Warnings that were never meant to be forgotten. Bloody Bones is one of those names. It does not belong to one place, or one time, or even one shape. It lingers. It returns. It waits. Across England the name appears again and again, whispered in farmhouses, muttered at doorways, spoken low beside dying fires. It is found near wells, in ditches, and in dark, stagnant stretches of water, where the ground sinks and the light does not reach. These are places where the air feels colder for no clear reason, where sound seems to fade, as though the world itself refuses to carry it further, and where even animals hesitate. And always, without exception, it is in places where something could be hidden. The earliest written references do not describe Bloody Bones in detail, and that is the first thing worth noticing. When it appears in folklore collections of the 18th and 19th centuries, it is not introduced as something new. There is no explanation, no attempt to define it, no effort to give it form. It is treated as something already known, something understood without needing to be spoken aloud, a presence already accepted. Most of the accounts are brief, uncomfortably so. A warning, a passing remark, a sentence spoken and then abandoned. It is as though those telling it did not wish to dwell too long, as though speaking too much might draw attention. But when those fragments are gathered together, a pattern begins to form. One of the earliest mentions comes from northern England, preserved in oral tradition long before it was written down. The description is simple, almost too simple. Bloody Bones lives in dark places, especially those that hold water. Wells, ponds, ditches, places where the surface appears still, but where depth hides what cannot be seen. Places where a child might wander and not return. In some regions it is said that Bloody Bones waits below the surface, unseen, unmoving, not even present in any way the eye can understand, until something disturbs the water. A bucket lowered, a stone dropped, a ripple where none should be, or a foot placed just a little too close to the edge. Then it rises, not with violence, not with suddenness, but with certainty, the kind of certainty that cannot be mistaken, and once it reaches you, it does not hesitate, it pulls you down. There is a recorded account from the north of England, passed through generations and later written down. A child was sent at dusk to draw water. The light was fading, that uncertain hour when shapes lose their edges and familiar places begin to feel less certain. The well stood beyond the hedgerow, where the land dipped and the trees seemed to lean inward. The place was known, avoided when possible, but still used when necessary. And that is often how such places remain, not abandoned, not forgotten, but endured. What happened next was not described as imagination or fear, but as something witnessed. The child approached the well and heard movement below. Not water, not echo, something else. A slow shifting, deliberate and heavy. A dragging sound, wet and unnatural, as though something moved where nothing should move at all. Then came the breathing, thin, drawn out, as though passing through something hollow, something broken. The child looked down. At first there was only darkness, a depth that swallowed what little light remained. But then something moved, not quickly, not suddenly, but slowly and deliberately, as though it had always been there and had simply chosen that moment to be seen. It rose, something pale, something shaped like a man, but wrong. Too long, too thin, its limbs uneven, its form incomplete. In places there was no flesh at all, only bone, exposed, darkened, as though it had lain too long in something that does not release what it takes. Its head hung forward unnaturally, as though it had forgotten how to hold itself upright. And where the face should have been, there was bone, not clean, not still, but something that seemed to move even when it did not. The account ends simply. The child ran and never returned to that place again. There is no embellishment, no attempt to explain, only the detail that matters. Something was there, and it had risen. Another account from the Midlands places Bloody Bones not in a well, but in a ditch, a low stretch of ground where water gathered dark and unmoving. Long after the rain had passed, children were warned away from it. Keep from the ditch, or Bloody Bones will have you. The warning was familiar, almost routine, but the place itself was not. A boy ignored it, not out of defiance, but curiosity. He stood at the edge and looked down into the still shallow water. At first there was nothing. Then something beneath the surface shifted. Not like a fish, not like current, something rising, slowly as though it had been waiting for that exact moment. Later, he described it as white beneath the water, but not smooth, not whole. Broken, as though it had been assembled rather than formed, like something made of parts that did not belong together. It did not break the surface. It did not need to. The boy fled before it rose any further, and though he was not taken, he never returned. In Cheshire and Lancashire, the same pattern appears. Bloody bones tied to water, to low places, to depth, but here something else is added. It does not only wait, it watches. There are accounts of people describing the feeling of being observed near certain wells or ponds. No sound, no movement, no visible sign. Only the certainty that something below knew they were there. One man said simply, "That water is not empty." He claimed he had seen something beneath it, not floating but standing, as though upright in the water, waiting. He never returned. Further south in Warwickshire, the story changes slightly. Here it is said that bloody bones can leave its place. Not often, not freely, but sometimes. A woman spoke of a hollow shoe she warned her children never to pass after dark. She heard movement at night. Not footsteps, but a dragging sound. Slow, heavy, as though something moved with effort, as though it was not meant to move at all. No one ever saw it clearly, but no one ignored the warning either, because some warnings do not need proof. Across all accounts, one thing remains the same. Not the shape, not the detail, but the place. A well, a ditch, a pond, a fixed point, something deep enough to hide what lies below, and something narrow enough to keep it there. Bloody Bones does not roam. It waits, and that waiting gives it shape, because what is not seen becomes whatever the mind allows it to be. Over time, the name became a warning. Stay away from the well, stay away from the water, stay away from the dark places, or Bloody Bones will take you. But the question remains, why this name, and why this form? Because warnings are rarely created from nothing. They are shaped by experience, by memory, by something that was seen, or believed to be seen, long before it was ever written down. And when enough people, in enough places, describe something similar, even in fragments, it becomes harder to dismiss entirely, not as fact, but as something that existed between them. The same fear, the same certainty that some places are not empty, even when they appear to be. If you were to stand now at the edge of an old well, you might see nothing unusual, only stone, only darkness below. But you might hesitate just for a moment before looking down, and in that moment, in that quiet, suspended breath, you may feel it. Something waiting, not moving, not seen, but aware. And that hesitation, that instinct, that pause before the unknown, is where Bloody Bones still exists, not in the water, not in the ground, but in the space between what is seen and what might be waiting, just out of sight.